Chapter 13, Part 4, we're going to get into flowers and gardens. Um, we're in Flanders here, and this is Bruegel. So he would paint these, and he's a Dutch master. Let's just start there. And this is Renaissance going into Baroque, and um, highly detailed imagery of flowers, just absolutely painted lovingly. And we're going to look at the transcendent image of flowers, gardens as living sculptures, and water in the garden as a central motif. So in his case, our little bouquet in a clay jar, it's fresh flowers and insects, um, and he's combining meadow flowers and he's combining cut flowers that would be in hothouse flowers. But these are different climates and seasons, like the iris and the tulip are early spring, and then the peonies. Actually, I think peonies are similar time frame, but they have different times where they're blooming. So he would do detailed sketches throughout the year of different flowers and different foliage as he gathered them, and then he put these paintings together. Some little insects down here. His feeling in reference to the jewelry down here that flowers were more important and valuable than jewelry and jewels and gold and things like that. They are very temporary and fleeting, so that's one reason I would imagine he's thinking this. Another would be that we're in a cold climate, there's no flowers and there's no greenery for a big chunk of the year, so the tulips and the spring flowers bring on a stronger importance. So sacred symbols, the iris here represents Jesus, and the rose stood for Mary. That I would call a rose. It looks more like a peony from here, but I believe that is a rose right there. Okay, so flower paintings are popular in both China and Japan, and our example here. And by the way, these are stamps of the artist that is working, and also some other perhaps meaningful things that they want to say about the work. So this is from memory, and we're an ink on paper, lovingly sort of rendered. Now this is really very different. This is from 1280. Doesn't have just a quick gestural feel to it. It's very studied and thoughtful in this particular case. So flower arranging is considered an important art form. Ikebana is what it's called in Japan. There's a different style in China, but flower arranging is thought to be uh, a very key and important art form. There's certain structures that you would follow, and it's on the level of painting, calligraphy, and pottery in these cultures, especially Japan. Okay, so it has refined brushworks, elegant curves, crisp strokes, and it's off balance. It's irregular composition. Okay, um, symmetry is important to a lot of cultures. In Japan, the asymmetrical or three groups of three, which we actually see here, Ikebana is based on three stems that go up. There's one, two, and three main stems: beauty, simplicity, and timelessness. One of the popular flowers or Ikebana um, uh, types of structures you would have, I don't want to call it a flower, would be a branch from a plum or a pear tree when it has its blossoms. So a few branches would be cut while the tree is blooming in the spring. So this is a pear blossom poem. I'm not going to stay here. You can look at the regular PowerPoint of the book. We're going to look at the gardens for the Barber supervising the layout of the Garden of Fidelity in India. In India, at the time of the Mughals, which we're looking at here, 1590, and you can tell by their the turbans and the dress here, and the symmetry here, the Mughal gardens, which we see in the Taj Mahal, and we're going to get there in a minute, those are really important because coming from Persia, and it's a very arid country, and gardens are revered because, and waterways, of course, when we're digging this sort of fountain and waterway, we're setting this up because water was scarce. Yeah. So also the layout of this garden is giving us some key concepts: the four directions, representing the four rivers of paradise, right? And then the four squares are repeated symmetry. So remember how we talked about Japan is asymmetrical. Symmetry is very important in Islamic culture, okay? And that travels with different nationalities, but they're here in India coming from Persia. Okay, so it's repeated and subdivided, and it maintains the integrity of the original layout. Okay, so Taj Mahal, we are looking at just such a waterway here. We can't see this direction very well from this angle, but we're looking down the waterway here, and there is another X, I believe, over here. So it has these gardens that are maintained. There are some different hedges here, lawn, and there's some other bushes and so on leading up to the Taj Mahal. So this is a Persian structure for Mumtaz Mahal, memorial piece. Just absolutely stunningly gorgeous, and you can see how this photo looks almost overexposed because it's just that white marble really catches the sunlight. Just absolutely stunning. All right, so different garden. We're going to look at the Zen garden in Japan. Remember, we were talking about asymmetry a little bit here. There are rocks, and these are sort of like islands, but see how they're not placed super, symmetrically? They're irregular, and irregularity is something that is admired in Japan. Now, how they're coming to this idea is the idea that perfection is not attainable through, Zen Buddhism. That's the idea. But also the idea of that level of craftsmanship where, sure, you can just make something absolutely perfect, but why not add some interest, if that makes sense? So they're not saying be messy and sloppy. They're saying be perfect, yet um, free and sort of, I want to say, add some irregularity to it. Okay, so this is sort of a pond or lake idea with rocks. This is all rock right here, and you can see how it's combed a little bit. There's some rake marks around here, but it's raked in a particular way. No footprints would be seen. You don't walk through it. You sit on the edge and you meditate. Okay, so it's quartz gravel. It represents the void of the universe. And the dark rocks represent material substances and worldly events. So you can kind of think of them as interruptions in the meditation of the universe. Does that make sense? Rake gravel signifies waves, and the boulders represent mountains. Okay? The 15th boulder can only be seen through the mind's eye. So there's a lot of things in Buddhist culture where it's implied, or you only see it, you imagine it to be there, but you know to imagine it, if that makes sense. All right, here we go. Pieces for the final. So we looked at the Nazca lines, which is a different way of showing a large scale earthwork. That was more of a removal of rock. This would be and I'm going to let you remember what removal correlates to in sculpture. This is more of an accumulation of mass and a piling of material, and I'm going to let you look up what that means. Moving stuff together, into a form. This is very ancient. This is over 1,000 years old. And this is a North American indigenous people's work, same as South America in Peru. A little bit different time frame, but same idea, where this is a serpent and it is swallowing an egg here. Okay, so we don't know what these ceremonial mounds were exactly about, or the earthworks from the Nazca lines, because those cultures have not continued. There was a break in terms of migration, and those cultures are no longer what we call extant. They don't exist anymore. So similar to when we look at Pueblo pottery, there's what we call the Anasazi, the ancient ones. There are some DNA connections to current peoples, but by and large, those peoples died out, and the tradition was sort of broken, and then due to drought or famine or something like that, and then it reemerges in a similar way elsewhere, but we don't have a direct connection to the mythology or the idea behind it. Okay, so this is a modern piece made in the 70s, and this is a site-specific artwork. That's one term you need to know. And this is an earthwork, but this is also called land art, okay? So this is in the 20th century, 1970s. It was very popular, and this still goes on today. At UNM, University of New Mexico, they have a land art part of the art department, so you go out and work on these giant things. And there's one called Double Negative in Nevada that just finally opened after 40 years. So people have been picking at this stuff for 40 and 50 years trying to get these things done. James Turrell has one in Flagstaff, Arizona. It's called Road and Crater. It is still not open, and he's still working on it, and he's getting to be in his 80s. So it's very hard when you're moving giant amounts of material. We don't have what the Egyptians would have in terms of the labor force. This is done by a handful of individuals, so it does take a very long time. This is Robert Smithson, and he made Spiral Jetty. This is the most famous land art piece, and this is on the edge of the Great Salt Lake in Utah. So this is inland. This is in Utah, and for a while, for a number of years, I think close to a decade, this was underwater. The lake level rose, and now it's back lowered again. I mean, you'd want to check before you go, but this is somewhere you can go to. These people are actually walking on the sand here because the lake bed is so low. But generally speaking, you have to walk on this jetty part of it right here. You have to walk on the rock. So he just took a bulldozer, dumped some dirt, dumped some more dirt, dumped some more dirt, moved out, and just made a pathway for this bulldozer and made a spiral. Ancient symbol, if we go back, he's affected and interested by these serpent mounds, and there are others of these that occur, not just in the U.S., but he was connecting to this concept, and also he was trying to get out of the gallery system. So he wanted to have something that was site-specific, that couldn't be moved or changed, and is permanently attached to a particular location. Okay, so that's part of his idea. There's more to it than that. Another one is Walter de Maria, the lightning field. This one is in New Mexico, a state away. And this is a field of lightning poles. So you see all these poles are lined up into a grid, rows and columns, and then lightning is to hit these particular poles, and you stay in this cabin overnight. What I heard is that, and I have still not done this, it's on my list, but they give you a lasagna and some water and a pillow, and you stay overnight in this cabin. I don't know why it's lasagna, but that's what I heard. But you can book this, and you have to stay in this cabin, and they won't come and pick you up for, I think, a day and a half, 36, 48 hours, something like that, 2 days. But you watch for lightning. Now, lightning doesn't always strike. Storms are unpredictable. So sometimes you're just sort of sitting out there, enjoying the atmosphere and the sagebrush. It just really depends. What I have heard, though, and these are 20 feet high poles, is that this is not a very popular place for lightning to strike. Although I will tell you this, New Mexico has a lot of volcanic rock underneath all of the growth, and that has a high iron content, which attracts the lightning. Okay, so contemporary earthworks are large-scale environmental pieces, and the earth is an important component, so taking materials from that space, removing them, moving them, that kind of thing, it's responsive to the site. Now, one thing you want to note about this is that it's not interrupting wildlife. It's not harming anything, if that makes sense. The water comes in and goes out as much as it normally would, pretty much. It's not creating any kind of a different biosphere or anything like that. There are some installation artists that do temporary things, like the Christos, but that is a very different thing. It is not earthwork, okay? But this is a monumental scale, and you think about the 70s, sort of the height of, I want to say, the bigger is better thinking. That we have our skyscrapers reach new heights in the 70s and so on. So bigger is better. They want to get out of the gallery and do something massive. Minimal, simple shapes. I'm going to have you look up the art movement associated with these works. There's a clue here. So he's influenced by these native North American cultures. Anything else we want to talk about? Oh, the Dia Foundation took this on, and then you get permission, and that's who gives you the lasagna. If you ever do go, ask them about the lasagna. So once you're there, you stay and you wait. And mostly people have just seen photographs of this. Not a lot of people actually go because it's only a small amount of people per day, that can go. It's not a lot of people. Okay.